Do you know the main difference between emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence? Well, if you answer no, then you're in the right place. Because in this video, I'm going to break it all the way down so that you learn how to take your emotional intelligence to the next level. It's kind of interesting, but when we think about emotional intelligence, the term is kind of thrown around so much that people just believe that it's a cool talking point more so than a good point of perspective. If you look around in the world today, you really notice that there's an uptick in a lot of different things going wrong. The main failure comes down to a failure of emotional intelligence. And so when I say that emotional intelligence is a system, let me break it down to you. Because I know you're probably thinking, well, how is it a system? Well, the reality of it is there's a difference between reacting and responding. So let's talk about reaction. You may hear that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That motion causes motion. So that means if somebody pushes you, quite naturally, you're going to think to strike back. You see, the thing about reaction is it doesn't require you to think. It just requires you to react. In other words, something happens to you, and then you happen to something, right? The problem with that is this. If you allow somebody, let's say, to anger you, and you become vindictive and you want to strike back at somebody because they did something to you, you don't really give them much thought. Your response is being dictated by your emotion. And your emotion at that point is matching somebody else's emotion. Hence, motion causes motion, or emotion causes emotion. Now, the thing about it is, just because someone may be nasty to you and say something or do something to you that would naturally cause anybody to be angry, it doesn't mean that you have to join a person in their pursuit of being angry and being nasty. So let's talk about responding now, right? When you respond, regardless of what happens to you, you have to give it a little bit of thought, right? Because when you respond, you actually think before you act. And this is becoming less and less common. And a lot of things that we see going on, this is the reason why. But everyone's just talking about the problem and they're not talking about the solution. So I want to talk about the solution, which is thinking. But sometimes people, they feel justified for not thinking. So let's go back to the original example. Motion causes motion. All right, so let's say somebody comes and they do something to you and it makes you upset. And you quite naturally feel justified in kind of fighting fire with fire. The problem is, if you fight fire with fire, everybody gets burned. But if you survive the initial burn, you may be the one to extinguish the fire. And wouldn't it be better to be a firefighter than fighting fire with fire? The real thing when it comes to responding is that a lot of people, they don't really even understand that they have time to think. And sometimes self-preservation, it will lead somebody to an immediate retaliation rather than a contemplation and then a response. And so I could definitely understand that, because sometimes the idea is that you have reflexes, and your reflexes are, believe it or not, they're kind of embedded in you through epigenetics, right? Because there's just a human nature that we all have to survive, and there's a human nature that we have to defend ourselves and to be able to stand up for ourselves ultimately. And the issue with that is when you find yourself on the wrong side of things like the law, or you find yourself on the wrong side of, social commentary because you didn't take time to think before you just fly off the handle, it's too late in most cases. And you can never rewind and do it again. You have to deal with the consequences, right? So I want to talk about the time, because I want to respect the fact that I know a lot of you are thinking, well, if somebody does something to you and it's really bad enough and you just want to do back to them what feels justified, This could be like microseconds, milliseconds, or seconds. A lot of times we're dealing with things that's happening in rapid fire. And so I want to talk about how you actually can be able to transcend the natural human nature because your life depends on it. Like your peace of mind depends on it. And so at this point, I want to talk about the main difference between emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence. All right. So this is like scientific, but I won't go too deep into all the science and break it down and everything, but I'm going to break down enough just to make sure you can really understand. It's said that intellectual intelligence is something that's kind of fixed at birth. So when a child is born, they kind of naturally have the capacity of their intellectual intelligence, although they're still learning, right? But the ability to learn is kind of fixed. So that's why with certain children, you could see, oh, that child is smart. Oh, wow, look at the things that they're doing, the things that they're observing and responding to. They're really smart. Like they have a pretty good intellectual intelligence. And that's also called IQ. Now, over time, IQ is judged off of different things, but like as you go through school and education and training, you know, it's expected that on a certain level, you'll be able to display a certain level of intellectual intelligence. The more you learn and the grade level that you're on in progression, they'll ask certain questions and they expect at this point in time, with your exposure to the information or the intel, that you will be able to display the intellectual intelligence, right? But the difference between that and emotional intelligence is this. People have different levels of emotional intelligence, just like they have different levels of intellectual intelligence. But the main difference is EQ, which is representing emotional intelligence, is more elastic. So it's something that anybody, by using the right systems and the right tools, can increase their emotional intelligence. That's a major difference when you think about one form of intelligence, which is impressive, but it's fixed. And then another form of intelligence, which can be impressive, but it can be expanded. So you can improve it. Let's talk about the training, right? Because a lot of people think about, well, if something happens to me, I'm going to be ready to go. But I'll probably react because motion causes motion. Somebody does something to me, I'm going to do something back without considering the consequences. But I think when you look around and you see the results that's happening in the world, I think you can start to tell that like it kind of is a benefit to you to learn how to think before you act. And therefore you could respond, right? So I could admit that when somebody comes at you and they do something nasty to you or disrespectful or something like that, it's very, very difficult to think before you act because it's human nature. So what you have to do is you have to think about it like, you know, working out in a gym. Let's say you want to train to become a bodybuilder. And in order to become a bodybuilder, I mean, you're going to have to be able to lift a lot of heavy weight, especially if you want to compete. And let's say you're training for a competition and you're not as strong as you need to be right now, but let's say you have a year to get ready for a bodybuilder competition. Obviously, you're going to start off with lighter weights because you have to build up the muscle over time. So emotional intelligence is kind of the same way. And here's what I mean by that. With emotional intelligence, there's a lot of decisions that you make every day that deals with your emotions that are not really high stakes. And you don't think about it because it's not high stakes. It just goes over your head, right? Well, if you start using these smaller decisions, these smaller moments to observe your emotions, and then remember that they're just your emotions, they're validated because you can acknowledge them, but they don't necessarily deserve to control you as long as you can step outside of it for a second and look at it and say, well, what would be the best outcome, right? What's really the best outcome? If I just react to this emotion, then it could go wrong. But if I respond to it, I may have to check my ego, but I'm in control at that point. So you could think of small decisions or small situations that might make you feel some type of way. Let's say it's a family member and they always do something that I talk to them about it. Let's say they leave the ketchup out the refrigerator or something like that, something stupid, right? And you're like, I want the ketchup in the refrigerator. And you had some arguments about it in the past or whatever. And then you come out and you see ketchup is sitting there on the counter. And you're like, this makes me upset. I'm ready to go tell them off or whatever. And then you think about it and you say, you know what? I just thought about the fact that I could just put it back in the refrigerator myself, swallow my pride and swallow my ego. And from there, I just won. I just built a little bit more muscle in the realm of emotional intelligence. And you'll find 1,000 of these little situations that happen all day, every day. In those moments where it's not really high stakes, right? You have time. You really do. You have a little time. It may be 5 seconds, but it's more than someone just does something and you just have to react to it, right? So you have time to think and say, you know what? Let me transcend this negative emotion. Let me think and let me make an action subsequently that actually benefits everyone involved, even the person who neglected to follow the instructions and left the ketchup out, right? But what happens is after you do that, you become a little bit more emotional intelligent, and then you find a better time to confront that person about it. And you can say, hey, you know what? Can I talk to you for a second? Hey, look, I know we've talked about this, leaving out the ketchup and everything, but today I came out and I saw you left it out again. And I was like, okay, I know we talked about it. I'm not going to give you hell about it right now, but I do want to talk to you now and just let you know that, like, it is important and we agreed upon it, right? So will you just next time, just don't forget, like, just put it back. Is that cool? And they say, that's cool. All right, yeah, I understand. And like right there, you win again because you've shown them that you're in control emotionally. So now you're not coming to them disrespectfully and then they want to disrespect you back because let's face it, not everybody's doing this kind of training, right? So when you think about that, imagine how crazy it gets when you have a bunch of people who have low intellectual, not intellectual, but who have low emotional intelligence. And they do something to you, you do something to them, they do something to you. And you got to ask yourself, like, when does that really end? So take advantage of these small moments where you can start thinking before you react. And what does that lead you to? It leads you to getting training before the pressure, before there's a situation that happens that really is high stakes. And you wouldn't believe it, but it's just like anything else that you train at. When you develop that quote unquote muscle memory, you're able to do things a lot quicker than what you were able to do before. And you're able to do things more effectively and more accurately. So when that moment does inevitably come, where someone challenges you or something challenges you, and is specifically challenging your emotional intelligence, you're able to respond instead of react because you have been training on the small things that were low stakes. You built enough emotional intelligence to prepare yourself for the high stakes situations. So when something crazy happens, you don't throw your life away, you don't harm other people, but what you do is you step back emotionally, even if it takes a millisecond, and you observe yourself and you say, you know what? My ego tells me and my instinct tells me to fly off the handle, but my newfound and new built emotional intelligence tells me that I can win right now by thinking about what's the best action I should take next. And just like that, you now become responsive. And being responsive makes you highly responsible. And so I talked about responsibility, but I'll say it one more time. Responsibility. It is the ability to respond. And I just told you how to do it. And it sounds so simple when we break it down like this, but the hard part is not the system alone. The hard part is the practice. Do you know what this is really about, and do you know how to practice? Practice by taking advantage of the small, low-stakes situations and opportunities that allow you to step outside of yourself and observe the situation and make a better decision by responding, which is when you think before you act, rather than reacting, which is just reenacting whatever happened to you. Then you feel the need to inflict that same harm upon somebody else. And that's reacting, meaning someone else acts upon you and then you react, which means you're out of control and you're actually being controlled by somebody else. And I'll say this too. A lot of times when people get disrespected, they feel like the person who disrespected them deserves their disrespect. And they think that them harming that person in some way makes them bigger, like, oh, I won. But in actuality, as soon as you react, you've lost because you literally just submitted to somebody else's control. And the crazy part is that your natural human instinct is going to look at that person and think that they're a weaker person because what they did was unwarranted and they shouldn't be acting like that. But if you react like that, then who's really in control? Who's really the weaker one? That's what I want you to think about. All right? So in closing, I just want to say it's going to be very important for you to do this training every single day. And I promise you, you will see a heightened level of emotional intelligence. Much love to everybody. It is very much appreciated for you all to tune in. And I will definitely catch you on the next one. Before you head out, I want you to make sure that you like, comment, share, and subscribe. But really, let's do it in the other order. Subscribe, share, comment, and like. I look forward to seeing y'all in the next one. Peace.